So is that it for this feature? Well, we can move into the other then. And I'll take this one. And in terms of gameplay modes, I would like to see historical battles. So again, maybe it's content, maybe it's feature, I don't care. I want historical battles. And Total War fans are already familiar with the concept, where instead of a standard random battle in Total War Arena, where you have a mixture of all kinds of factions, units, and whatever, you would have sort of a scenario that would obviously need to be initially balanced so that it's still okay. But yeah, you would have actual faction versus faction. So Rome versus barbarians, Rome versus Carthage, Greece versus, well, also Rome. I mean, that's kind of an issue. Rome have fought everyone, but the other factions didn't really fought each other. Maybe Carthage and barbarians a little bit. Yeah, Greeks versus barbarians, not that much of a thing. They didn't really have any big famous battles between each other. So yeah, the historical actual side of it might be a little bit of an issue because Rome, you queue up as Rome units and you have much shorter queue time, I guess, because you can fill as into every battle, every scenario, but not necessarily for the others. That could be an issue, I just noticed. But yeah, overall, that could be a cool feature for people to play, maybe as a custom battle. Then again, doesn't justify the development time. Anyway, guys, what do you think?
I mean, obviously, you could just thinking you could tie it into what you said earlier about campaigns. Somehow they are linked into these historical battles. Maybe like the final thing you have to do in these campaigns is fight one of these historical battles or something. I'm not specifically saying to lock them just for those scenarios, but that could be like a final challenge or something. And I also think with these historical battles, you have to be careful how you do it. Because even though there is like content from the Total War series of games where you can play like historical battles that are like sort of pre-made, I remember distinctly, ones from the Shogun and Napoleon. I'm not quite sure about the other games. I can't remember any specifically. But you have to be careful with the balancing of these type of things. Do you want to make it very historical? And say that, well, to join this historical battle, you need to have these units, these specific, say, Roman units? Or are you going to have it more general, where it's simply barbarians versus Romans within these sort of tiers?
Yeah, okay. So as you were speaking, I actually had an idea of how to fix that. So we could make it a PvE, but let's go back to PvP, right? If you were to do it PvP, World of Tanks did historical battles, and I know it didn't really work out for them.
Yeah, that was a balancing issue mainly because they tried to go for very historical, and that ended up with basically they had certain tanks that were historically in the battle, but because of the way they were implemented in the game, it was simply completely unbalanced. I remember there was one historical mode where it was Americans versus Germans, and one of the German tanks that was historically there at the time, it was simply impregnable to the American tanks that faced it historically, and because of the game. And so you've got to be careful with. Obviously, that's quite an extreme problem that was with the game, that it was simply impossible. But obviously, you've got to think about balancing from a game point, from standard games and the historical. You've got to make sure they tie in.
Well, just from the Total War series alone, you can look at some of the historical battles, like Rome 2 at the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. I'm gonna let you know right now, if those are real barbarian players, they're gonna massacre the Romans that were, in a thin column, have very little maneuvering room.
Okay, well, anyway, going back to what I was saying, we can make it a PvP, and if you were to make it PvP, make sure the tiers are equal on both sides, obviously. And in terms of historical accuracy and it's much easier to implement a balanced historical battle in Total War Arena setting rather than it is in World of Tanks setting, where you have like Tigers, which is tier 7, versus T-34s, which is tier 5, and You don't actually can have them outnumbering like 5-1 or whatever it was. But in terms of the arena, much easier if you make it PvP, but you can also make it PvE and make it, because, also it would have to be a separate queue and, obviously queue size, etc., etc. So PvE would actually solve a lot of those problems. And World of Warships has a very good implementation of it in, I think they're called scenarios, expeditions. Either of those.
Yeah, the weekly ones.
Yes, essentially you have a weekly rotation of a set of scenarios. Let's call them scenarios since those are scenario battles, historical battles in Total War franchise. So yeah, you can have 1 week, you have the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, and it's players playing as barbarians and going against Romans. Or maybe next week you can have also Teutoburg Forest, but this time as Romans versus barbarians, and it's basically PvE. AI has been vastly improved compared to a wargaming version, so it can actually pose a challenge. It can be entertaining as long as they balance it and make it a interesting way. Also, historical battles in Shogun 2 Fall of the Samurai, some of them at least, were real like stage based, where you move from one battle stage to the next. I like something like that, and I think it would be great addition into the arena. Then again, you also need to balance, to not make it too lucrative to go for those, because I know that's World of Warships problem right now, where they had to actually decrease the amount of rewards you get from those PvE battles, because people on tier 6 and 7 were basically just farming PvE because they wanted to avoid matchmaking, because matchmaking would put them against tier 8, tier 9s when they're in tier 6 and 7. So they usually get wrecked, and in PvE they get the same fun, and at least they don't get to fight unequal battles against players with higher tier units. And even if they face a higher tier ship, it's still balanced within the game mode itself, right? So it's a nifty implementation on how to make it still attractive for the players to play it, an interesting thing to play, and have it be rewarding, but still not take away too many players from the main game mode itself. But that's, again, details, and we just throw the general ideas, and if CA likes it and wants to pick up that idea, well, they can fine-tune the details themselves and with our help as well. But let's not do all of it in one place, which is this podcast. Astolfo, any thoughts?
No, man, I think you covered
Okay.
it.